Jai Ma. So we are continuing the series on education. Possibly either this will be the last of the series on this volume, or maybe one more or half a more. So today we'll read some of our guidance about Sri Aurobindo's works and making choices. What exactly is the essence of what Sri Aurobindo is trying to tell us? So people often ask how to read Sri Aurobindo. So I sort of add one question which should come even before. Why should one read Sri Aurobindo? Because there are a number of books, so-called spiritual books, all kinds of teachings, yoga, everything is there. So why Sri Aurobindo? Because Sri Aurobindo brings in a completely, entirely new understanding to the to our understanding of life, of creation, of ourself, of world, of God, and our relation with all these things. Because that's what we are ultimately looking for. So I'll just read a little passage on that. That what Sri Aurobindo is really bringing to us. Till the birth of Sri Aurobindo, religions and spiritualities were always centered on past figures, and they were showing as the goal the negation of life upon earth. This is so true. So you had a choice between two alternatives. Very clear, absolutely. And this is the question many of us have. At least this was my burning question. So what was the choice between two alternatives? A life in this world with its round of petty pleasures and pains, joys and sufferings, threatened by hell if you were not behaving properly, etc., etc. So this was one choice. Naturally, anybody with a little awakened mind, leave aside hell and heaven, would feel that what is this round, what is this circle in which we are caught, where every pleasure comes with the tagline as an under footnote, five pains will follow you. So it is written in footnote. The doctor will tell us later on what are the pains. So generally it's like, and never, if we really look at it very squarely, it's never fulfilling in the deepest sense of the word. We get satiations, satieties, temporary satisfactions. But look at even a single thing like hunger, it rises back again. 6 hours, 8 hours, anything. So it's there is satiety, but never a satisfaction, a sense of fulfillment. So when one considers this, then there is another option which is provided to us. Option B is an escape into another world, heaven, nirvana, moksha. That yes, this is an endless circle. After some time you get bored and you want another place. Where do I go? This is moving in senseless wheel. So then okay, fine. Either through religion you can go to a heaven, or through spirituality you can go to moksha, arrive at nirvana, etc., etc. So these were the two options. It's very evident both are incomplete because something in man wants it here and feels that escape is cannot be the ultimate complete truth. So this is there in human consciousness always. Also, it gives a whole lie to the creator himself, because if there is a creator and if there is a creation like this, it's absurd if it has to end abruptly. And it also it creates many paradoxes. For example, if nirvana is the ultimate truth, then how is this creation? You may say it's energy which is moving around, but energy has to have some origin, something, somewhere the ball has started. So, of course, the proponents of nirvana doctrine, they don't concern themselves with this question, which is fair enough. They say, well, this question is only of an intellectual importance. What is important is there is suffering and you need to quit, and we'll tell you the way to come out of it. This one way to bypass it. This question is not important. And the Mokshvadins, they try to answer it by an equally greater paradox, that there is some mysterious Miss Maya, she comes and creates this world out of some equally mysterious energy, and forget about her workings, but she has all created this illusion, you have to come out of it. So it never satisfied either our intellectual seeking or our heart's longing. So between these two, there is nothing much to choose. They are equally bad. Absolutely. I mean, so if we want one of these, then obviously Sri Aurobindo is not really, we are not ready for that. Sri Aurobindo has told us that this was a fundamental mistake which accounts for the weakness and degradation of India. Buddhism, Jainism, illusionism were sufficient to sap all energy out of the country. It's true, because everybody became otherworldly, and this world is to be ultimately discarded. And so it's the energy, the vitality which you find in the days of the Mahabharata and Ramayana, the rishis, their power, all that is gone. We, of course, remember them and celebrate their birthdays, but in actual practice, we have become illusionist, at least in thought. True, India is the only place in the world which is still aware that something else than matter exists. The other countries have quite forgotten. Forgotten, she's using the word, not like they didn't know. So if you really go back and read some of these philosophies, spiritual life actually, which existed, as I said, I was so fascinated when I read about Chaldea and the Chaldean philosophy. It's so close to Vedas. Actually, if I just substitute the terms, I would think Chaldean philosophy is the Vedic. Some Vedic rishi is speaking of these things, including the para and the apara. It's absolutely Vedic. The concept of the lokas, the integration of heaven and earth. Then Gaia, that's another very fascinating civilization. So there have been civilizations which have forgotten. So she's using the word very carefully, that India remembers, the other countries have quite forgotten it. Europe, America, and elsewhere. That is why she still has a message to preserve and deliver to the world, but at present she is splashing and floundering in the muddle. So we have a lot of rituals and puja and karma kand, and then we have those Vedantic philosophies actually. But other than that, nothing in between, nothing that can integrate. So other day, nowadays these things circulate. So something was circulating about someone saying about Brahman, immutable. I said, now let's go beyond that. I mean, we have been hearing this for, at least come to the Gita, which speaks about the Ishvara beyond the Brahman. Not the Ishvara of the deity worshipping sadhak of the Sagun, but the Ishvara who is beyond the Shar and the Akshara, Purushottama. So then of course he wrote back, yeah, I know, but this is what most people stop at that, because Brahman is a door of escape. But there is something beyond. So you should speak. So he says, Sri Aurobindo has shown us that the truth does not lie in running away from earthly life, but in remaining in it, to transform it, divinize it, so that the divine can manifest here in this physical world. So all those who feel this impulse, this urge, this aspiration somewhere, that life must be complete, and this completeness means the two halves, the upper and the lower, should come together. Otherwise, going there, discarding this is incomplete. Living here, discarding that is incomplete. So in Savitri, we have Satyavan saying the same thing, that when I found the self, I lost the world. When I found the world, I lost the self. And I have been looking for the golden link which I find in you. So another thing we see, that a lot of nowadays comparison of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy with some of these past scriptures, which is okay. I mean, each one should do whatever they feel. But we must know, Sri Aurobindo does not belong to the past nor to history. For this reason, very obvious, that there is something which has never been not only attempted before, well, it has never been conceptualized before. Now, when we use the word attempted, we must qualify that, if we look in Sri Aurobindo's light, then we can understand some of the past efforts in a new way. Possibly they were trying to attempt something, but it has never been left like a proper document or some realization. But there is an effort. That's how Sri Aurobindo also puts it, that the Vedic rishis were trying it. As I said, Chaldea was trying it. Some of the ancient civilizations probably were trying to fuse the heaven and earth, but they did not quite succeed. So this is one thing, that why we should read, because if this is our quest, then there is nowhere else that we can find the answer. We discussed the future. It seemed to me that all the teachers were eager to do something so that the children could become more conscious of why they are here. At that point, I said, now the teacher is saying, I said, that in my opinion, to speak to the children of spiritual things often has the opposite result, and that these words lose all their value. There is a great truth in it. I know some students who have studied here in the ashram school, and they completely felt so dismayed because some of the teachers who belong to the old time and old school, they would use words like, if you do this way, it is like devil and you will go to hell. They are basically transposing terms of which children will just not agree. I mean, why children? I would never agree to such a God who punishes you and sends you to hell. And all these terms that, if you are not obeying, you are a devil. So all this, just it's okay that he's a little devil. Not that way, but with all seriousness. But Sri Aurobindo, the mother, doesn't say that. So this idea of spiritual things often, unless it's an awakening. It's not like this is spiritual life, sit down, meditate, and now you will have a mantra. So, this often turns away the children. So when she is told, the teacher says that, then mother asks, spiritual things? What does he mean by spiritual things? So the disciple says, obviously, if the teachers recite them like a story. So you can teach, say, Upanishads or Vedas or things like that this is spiritual stuff. Next class we'll have history. Then we'll have geography. Then we'll have mathematics. But this is never how even ancient Indian civilization was built. So often when we have these discussions, even Indian knowledge systems, I said, without realizing this fundamental truth that knowing the Brahman, you can know everything. So they went to the core, and that's exactly what Sri Aurobindo brings out in the Life Divine, that if you know that core, potentially you can know everything from that, because from their energy and all its, whirls and patterns and forms have come. So the divine flows into the electron, you see. So it opens a completely new door. But if you say this is the atomic world, this is the material world, there is a spiritual world, then you have missed the link. So she says, spiritual things, they are taught history or spiritual things, they are taught science or spiritual things, that is the stupidity. Very clear. In history, the spirit is there. That's how, see, Ramayana and Mahabharata. They are at once history, itihas, and at the same time, the whole spiritual and the dharma is flowing in the very theme. It's interwoven. You can't separate one from the other. You can't say, okay, here it's just a narrative of history. Here there is a spiritual element when a sage suddenly comes and gives a lecture. Hardly you find all that. It's interwoven. Even the epic Savitri has its origin there. Epic Savitri in the Mahabharata, also it's there in Brahma Vaivarta Puran. There also it's. So in Savitri's epic is not retold as, okay, I'll tell you about some great, mighty spiritual truth. Yudhishthira is a practical question that my wife or our wife has suffered so much. And she is a very good lady. All of us know that. And she has to suffer so much. Is there anybody in the world who has suffered like that? Because Yudhishthir's heart is burning with pain. Sense of, not only hurt pride, but sense of guilt, because he's Sattvic man. And he's thinking, what has he done? So Markandeya recites the story by saying, yes, in way back times, there was a woman who not only met with adverse fate, but conquered it. Now you see, it's not narrated as some spiritual story to pacify us that, look here, these things happen. Ultimately there is the divine, he knows, he takes care of everything. That's how he's not putting a balm, he's showing a way of conquest. And so she says, in history the spirit is there. That's what Ramayana and Mahabharata is classic examples. In science, the spirit is there. Many people may not be aware that in the 6 schools of Vedic philosophy, one of them is pure science, Vaisheshika. It's about the atom, atomic structure, and all that is derived from that fundamental truth. If you look at it, there is also agnosticism. So all these come from a certain understanding which is born from looking at the world from different facets of the one reality. So it's very amazing. In science, the spirit is there. The truth is everywhere. And that's what I feel that nowadays, one of the things which often people ask, how to teach spirituality or about divine, because now every term has been corrupted. The moment you say God, they think God of religion. So God of religion is strict. No. But there is one term which everybody can relate with, whether science or spirituality, and it is truth. And so teach them about truth, to discover truth and discover it in their own way, express the truth. It will take humanity by leaps and bounds way forward. So truth is truth, and it requires courage. It requires a very great degree of inner development even to recognize truth and to express it, to manifest it, to understand truth. It takes us straight, because after all, what really is spirituality? Taking us to the absolute truth, which is the bedrock of existence. So there are relative truths and there is the absolute truth. And from there all these things are derived. So truth. So she says truth is everywhere. And what is needed is not to teach it in a false way, but to teach it in a true way. They cannot get that into their heads. So this conversation is 67. So she says, Mother, won't it be better if the teachers were to concentrate solely on the subject they are teaching, for you are taking care of the spiritual life? Now this is another problem. That okay, we'll not teach about this at all, we'll talk about subjects and leave it all. Spiritual life is the individual thing, leave it all to the mother. Very smart way of now, is called spiritual bypass. So she says, I shall give him this reply. There is no spiritual life, it is still the old idea of the sage, the sannyasin, the who represents spiritual life while all the others represent ordinary life, and it is not true, it is not true at all. So then what is true? Now she is revealing to us, if they still need an opposition between two things. For the poor mind doesn't work if you don't give it an opposition. If they need an opposition, let them take the opposition between truth and falsehood. That's something undeniable across the board. Whether you are a theist, a pragmatic person, idealist, believer, non-believer, religion, spiritual, scientific mind, truth is, you may differ on the ways of discovering it, finding it. You may, try to present truth in one particular angle. All that is fine. That's where, you can call out the lie. But there is, this truth is something which is, and that's how it is said, where truth is its backbone. Even Satyamev Jayate, truth is the path of truth, which is what is wins. So she says that teach, if at all this, it is a little better. I don't say it is perfect, but it is a little better, because the last reconciliation is the divine and the undivine. But for that, it's only in supramental consciousness that the two get reconciled, because you see what you call as undivine is a stage of, in time-space configuration, a manifestation which was needed at some point. Then when you overpass it, what was true becomes false. Like sacrifice of human and animals in way back times was a way to approach God. But then after some time, today when you look at it, it's evil. It's very clearly evil. So, if you want to eat meat, it's okay. But to sacrifice in the name of God. So, when you look at it that way, then you understand that what we call as undivine is simply because either, as Sri Aurobindo says, that evil is either good in the making or good in the passing. So it is something which is out of it, good is going to come. Like out of the gladiators and those, now Olympics are there, so you don't actually kill people in the wrestling ring. You follow certain rules. And otherwise it's good in the passing. There were things which were useful in previous times, say when society was very primitive. Then you needed very harsh rules and you blamed it on God, I would say. So everybody had to follow it. But as humanity grows, becomes more subjective, conscious within, you have to do away with all that and bring in, appeal to their own subjective self. So she says that ultimately even this has to go. So in all things, falsehood and truth are mixed everywhere. It's very important because we try to create a trenchant division. Tell me the truth, tell me the truth. Sometimes, when somebody asks, I said, know the truth, know the truth. You don't know the truth. So what about me? I said, I'm also, I don't know the truth, full truth. I'm still discovering that totality. When I discover, yes, I'll share, if at all, because you will not understand. It's so dangerous to speak a truth. That's why great ones have refrained from speaking about it. Because it defiled the moment it enters into the human domain. We receive it and give it our own angle. And poor gods suffer because when they see what we are made of, Shiva and Krishna, they must be really wondering, what are they doing in my name? In the name of Shiva, they are taking cannabis. In the name of Krishna, all the dance and this and Ras Leela, all vital love in the name of Krishna. So, if at all they were to see, I'm sure they see and laugh because they are too vast and they feel amused. But that's it. But to say that this is, and then to justify with a whole sort of legends and stories. So, here comes this. Falsehood and truth are mixed everywhere. In this so-called spiritual life, in sannyasins, in swamis, in those who think they represent the life divine on earth, all that, there also there is a mixture of falsehood and truth. It would be better not to make any division. So it's very interesting. I used to wonder what really she is saying. So that's a principle that I have tried to follow in life, that in everything, there is an ingot of gold. She has used this word. So there is that little gold which is somewhere hidden inside. Just like in a heap of grain, there is that little wheat grain which is inside. So don't reject the whole thing. Extract that bit of gold. That's the jewel or the wealth you carry with you. So people often ask, what do we carry? Some say you carry nothing, you go empty-handed. No, sir, hands are empty, but your heart may be full. Sure enough. So you carry your karma. No, sir, we carry the essence of the karma. Essence is something very different. It's the experience. And it's like this, that when we go through school, we have forgotten. Like at that point of time, you wanted to get full marks in trigonometry. And you thought you are a great fellow because you got mark in the field of mathematics, which... Now, if you ask me about trigonometry, well, nothing. All that I remember is sine theta, cos theta. But what it means. But then it prepared my mind to a certain kind of complexity. And that's what is important. That's the essence. Whether you passed, you failed, all that is not important. For instance, what was that Shylock's, when I was reading Shakespeare, and then you discover, how he would, that character, Macbeth. So you see these characters which are living. It's not about remembering what dialogue he said. But, some of these things now resonate at a very deep level, like et tu Brutus. Then you realize that even your closest friend under the spell of whatever falsehood can turn totally against you. Or for he thought a greater good. So you see how they are intertwined. What they thought as good turns out to be not what they thought. When they wanted to break through Caesar and, Julius Caesar and, finish the republic and bring in, finish the dictator and bring in the republic. So actually this ended up in just the opposite effect. So it's very interesting when you read history that way. You see how out of evil good comes, out of goodness, evil gets strength, like the story of Karna. So it's very fascinating when we look at it like that. They intertwined everywhere. So she says, it would be better not to make any division. Extract that gold from everything. And that's what we carry. At the end, who is bothered whether you passed or failed? But yet you have to go through. If you can laugh when death stares in your face and say, okay, hello, not you, mother. That's called success. That's my yardstick. That if death stares in your face, you can look back and say, look here, you don't belong here. And when mother comes, you don't wait for a moment. Mother, I have this work to do, that mission to fulfill. No. If mother comes, mission accomplished or fulfilled. Then you simply say, come. You say, hip hip hooray. So that is success. Then it doesn't matter what you did or didn't do and what you went through or didn't go through. That's called you carry with you the essence of karma. So that's what she's telling us, not to make any division. Even for Swami, it's so difficult, when actually you're confronted with that enigma of death, the challenge of death. So that's where, and of course in everyday life. So the teacher says, they're very interesting teachers, no? They don't give up. Like Arjuna wanting to ask again and again. But see, this is the beauty of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. You could ask anything. And you could ask again and again. Girls are asking about their periods, about their body, what really is good looks, everything. And she would reply. So beautiful, nothing imposed. So the disciple says, in all the things that are written or in the lectures they give, use inflated speech without any truth or personal experience, which has no effect, or rather a negative effect. That is what he is referring to. So Mother says, but not so long ago, most of the teachers were saying, oh, but we must do this because it is done everywhere. Then she smiles. They've already come a little distance, but there is much more to be covered. But above all, now distance is not about this statement, about that, they are saying that, inflated words, etc., are not how things should be communicated. That means they have come a little distance. Earlier they were saying we should do what is done everywhere. But above all, what is most important is to eliminate these divisions, and every one of them, all of them, have it in their minds, the division between leading a spiritual life and leading an ordinary life. Having a spiritual consciousness and having an ordinary consciousness. And then she says very powerfully, there is only one consciousness. So powerful it is. There is only one consciousness. That's how I am reminded of this story of the gopis with Krishna. And Uddhav comes to teach them about spiritual life. See, these mad women and men, they are just dancing about, running, they are so full of Krishna, full of joy. What's wrong? Krishna, why don't you teach them about Brahman? So Krishna says, you go and teach, you are a good teacher. You have read all these scriptures, I have not read scripture. He was yet to deliver his scripture on the battlefield. So Uddhav says, okay. So he says, but they won't listen. He says, you tell them that I have sent you. I'll give you a written note. So he takes a written note and goes. And when he says, Krishna has sent me, here is the note written by him. Oh, written by him, they snatch it. He has written it. Krishna himself, they are so full of love. So they are, I want to read it, and the piece of paper gets torn. So then they ask him, okay, Mr. Uddhav, what have you to say? He says, see, all that you are doing, this, this love, joy, all this not spiritual life. He says, okay, Krishna has sent you, you must listen. He says, you must know that, being devoted to Krishna and, taking, all this will not lead you. You must concentrate, meditate on Brahman. I said, okay, fine. What do I do? He says, you must do some breath practice, pranayam, first, to learn to concentrate. So somebody raises a hand. Uddhav sir, one small question. He says, what? He says, you know what? We have only one prana. We have given our breath to Krishna. Nothing is left now to pranayam. For us, breathing is Krishna, living is Krishna, eating is Krishna. What do you want us to now separately meditate upon? See, this story is very interesting. You want us to sit separately and meditate through breathing control. I must enter into a deep inner state. So Uddhav comes back. He initially tries, then he realizes that Krishna had sent him so that he can learn something. And then he goes back that I went as a teacher, but I have come back humbled. Because he goes and meets Radha. He says, they say you won't understand. Go and tell her, teach your teaching. So Radha is sitting quietly. He says, she starts saying, Krishna there. He says, where? He says, there. He says, first get your facts right. So what is the fact? He says, he's everywhere. What, he's everywhere? He says, yes. He's here. He's in you. He's in me. She's in all of them. So which Krishna are you talking about? Now it's his turn. See, Madhav at one place says, Sri Aurobindo came to teach this truth to world, that the divine is everywhere and in everything. You don't have to leave the world to find God. You don't have to enter into limited relations with Him to discover the truth. And He is everywhere and in everything. And if you cannot discover Him, it's only because you do not care to do so. You see what a vast and profound, and it's what original Sanatana Dharma was. If you read the Isha Upanishad, so she says that, in most people, it is 3/4 asleep and distorted, this one consciousness. In many, it is still completely distorted. So what is needed is to wake it up. And wake it up and make it full, complete. So this is how she teaches about the one. And then, so the question comes about truth and falsehood. So, two things which are important. So she has spoken, if at all there has to be division, you have to teach them it's about truth and falsehood. So how to distinguish between truth and falsehood in the impulses of action? This is very interesting, because if you go into the intellectual side, eventually you will realize a fusion. Because truth is everywhere and it's working through the layers and coats of falsehood and ignorance. But in action you have to make a distinction. That's where the problem comes. So she says, those who wish to help the light of truth to prevail over the forces of darkness and falsehood can do so by carefully observing the initiating impulses of their movements and actions. Initiating impulses. So one is the act. The act may be outwardly very nice, like smiling pleasantly, like when you enter an aircraft and, good morning sir, please come sir, and while going, yes sir, with all the namaste. Initiating, what is motivating us, that's what is important. So initiating impulses. And discriminating between those that come from the truth and those that come from the falsehood, in order to obey the first and to refuse or reject the others. It means a kind of vigilance. So how to do it? She says, indeed, it is very difficult to discriminate the impulses of truth from the impulses of falsehood unless one has received the special gift of discrimination that the light of truth has brought. However, so once she says you have to have a sort of discernment. It's not there because we are so biased, we have preferences, attachments, ego. So many times, as they say, the world suffers from two things, wrong indulgent and wrong abstinence. So sometimes you don't say certain thing because you are not you better would have said, but you don't say because it may now falsehood comes in. Or you sometimes say when there was no need to say it, or it was not true. So she says, to help at the beginning, one can take as a guiding rule that all that brings with it or creates peace, faith, joy, harmony, wideness, unity, and ascending growth comes from the truth. So faith, joy, harmony, peace, ascending truth, light, it comes from truth. While all that carries with it restlessness, this is important because this is a sign which, Falsehood creates all. How to recognize desire? Restlessness, doubt, skepticism, sorrow, discord, selfish narrowness, inertia, discouragement, and despair come straight from the falsehood. Very simple this is. You don't have to read a scripture, you don't have to. And several times, every time, one has to keep observing oneself. And one will discover, oh, this particular movement was not really the initiating impulse. And then you simply put a little a red line and say, this way. And then you grow. So all that brings peace, joy, harmony, beauty, light, as opposed to all that brings sorrow, skepticism, doubt, discord, quarrel, division, narrowness, shrinking, all this is falsehood. So beautiful. And there is a question people often ask, and this in context with mother's music and many other things. Question is that, am I right in saying that when the mother plays on the organ, certain chords of music create the necessary vibrations for the manifestation of the higher force which the mother wants to establish on earth? That's about mother's music. But the answer is very vast. Because people often ask, what are people doing in the ashram? They are simply eating food in the dining room, they go to meditate, they are working in an ashram department. What are they doing for the world? Now here comes something very interesting. She says, when somebody lives in a higher consciousness, she wants or expects is a qualified term, that we ascend and start living in a higher consciousness. So what happens when that happens? The vibrations of this higher consciousness are manifested in whatever this person does, says, or thinks. This is exactly what is the essence of the Kena Upanishad. At the end of Kena Upanishad, this is the question which is raised. That what is the use of it? It doesn't use the word use, but what about the realized and liberated man? So it answered that he becomes a radiating stream of sweetness which attracts the honeybees. That's how even Sri Ramakrishna explained. He said, it's like a flower. You blossom like a flower, divine flower, fully blossomed. So all around people get drawn. Why? Because of this inner truth that you carry. That's all. So that's a great service. You don't go out doing service or claiming, because ultimately people are suffering because of this touch. All else is provided in the world, but this touch is what is missing, of authentic love, acceptance, joy, inner peace. These higher vibrations are manifested by the very fact of the presence of this person upon earth. So that's all that is. We have to try to live more and more. And then, of course, cause of difficulties everywhere, including the ashram, including Auroville, world, everywhere. So people try to analyze why the difficulties are there. Even now, there is a tariff war going on. So what is the difficulties? If you go to the core of it, she says, in human life, the cause of all difficulties, all discords, all moral sufferings is the presence in everyone of the ego with its desires, its likes and dislikes. So any action done under ego, moved by desire, even if it's a very sweet talk, is something which is going to create a discord. And any action, even an action like the Mahabharata war, but done with that sense of truth inside, nobody will know. The divine will know, or your own nature will know in its sincerity. Like on the Second World War, Sri Aurobindo had put his force with the Allies. So that carries within itself, because it's not done for any personal reasons. Even in a disinterested work which consists in helping others, until one has learned to overcome the ego and its demands, until one can force it to keep calm and quiet in one corner, the ego reacts to everything that displeases it, starts an inner storm that rises to the surface and spoils all the work. So this is the problem. So whenever there is a quarrel, time to step back. You can try initially, whatever, but after that, step back. Because the more you get into it, the more there will be a storm will. This work of overcoming the ego is long. Ego doesn't go away with the psychic being emergence. Sri Aurobindo says very clearly, even some of these other things they get softened. So what happens is that ego becomes like a very plastic instrument of the divine. So even if it gets in a moment, then very soon it gets softened, it understands. Like some of these sages, like Swami Vivekananda, would suddenly, if he gets angry, next moment he will be like butter melted. And people won't realize, did he really get angry? But he would get. And it was like, it is said that other Swamijis had to hold him. Brahmanand, when he would see Swami Vivekananda suddenly bursting out in rage, he would have to pull his arm and say, Swamiji, come inside, come inside. Next moment he will be like a child. So that's what happens, because the ego has become very softened. You don't carry it like a knot inside or a grudge against someone and I have to prove a point. I got beaten, I am going to take revenge, I am going to... that's where the asura comes in. So she says it's a long work. Until one can force it to keep calm and quiet in one corner. This work is long, slow and difficult. It demands constant alertness and sustained effort. This effort is easier for some and more difficult for others. And then she drops a, what is called, mother bomb, as they say, shattering the fortresses of her ego. So people ask often, why are we here in the ashram? We are here in the ashram to do this work. Arjav actually said this. He was the British mathematician. What was his name? John Chadwick. Chadwick I remember, but I am forgetting the first name. So Sri Aurobindo had given the name Arjav. So he comes, Arjav is one of the divine qualities described by Shri Krishna. So he comes clear. So he is... somebody came and asked, what Arjav, what are you doing? What Chadwick, what are you doing here? You were teaching mathematics in the UK in such a... What are you doing here? So he says, if I tell you, you won't understand because I am doing a much more difficult work. So they asked, what work? He says, I am trying to overcome my ego. So he said, okay, that's it. He said, you won't understand. That's what Sri Aurobindo says, the ashram is a place of labor but of a different kind. It comes from the root shram. Shram is labor. But what is the labor here? Not working 6 hours in dining room or nursing home, not nursery and everywhere. That's an outer framework. But there you are interacting with people or guest house or anywhere. Basically, all this is stimulating, triggering ego reactions, desire, anger, all this. And like a samurai, one has to catch it and beat it. That's what. But if I start beating the opponent, then it's gone. I lost that. So it continues. This game continues and the level increases. That's the beauty of this. It's literally, if I look at it like that, and it's really like a simulation game where you are playing. Then if you have crossed level 1, it's not like you are given a title, okay, he is Swamiji or Mahaswami. No. The level of the difficulty increases. Navjatji once told this to a person. He says, it's like high jump when you cross a bar. It's not like mother says, okay, fine, now you can rest, take a medal, have some sip of... She quietly raises it. There is a famous story of a person lifting weight and 10 and 10, 20 and 20, then 30 and 30. Then beyond it he said, I don't think I can lift it. So mother took another 10 and 10. That means from 60 it is going to become 80. She put on both sides. She is not taking out. She is adding. And then she says, now you lift it thinking it's not you but I who am lifting it. A real story. So the difficulty mounts till you laugh at it, you pass through it like, nothing. Fly through it. So this is how the yoga works. And she says, we are here in the ashram to do this work together. with the help of Sri Aurobindo's knowledge and force. How beautiful this is. In an attempt to realize a community that is more harmonious, more united, and consequently much more effective in life. Very difficult work. Maybe 100 years project. So what? So she has given this work to all of us. Now she says something which is very amazing. Amazing because it is said in 69 when mother was not actively going out. But when I read this, it's like she has foreseen all this and fixed up everything. So she says, as long as I was physically present among you all. She is physically present, but she was in the room. She didn't come down after 62. And this in 69. As long as I was physically present among you all, my presence was helping you to achieve this mastery over the ego. And so it was not necessary for me to speak to you about it individually very often. But now this effort must become the basis of each individual's existence. And ego wears a countless masks. That's the whole story. More especially for those of you who have a responsible position and have to take care of others. If you are a head of department or you are, all the more. Everything she has very beautifully explained. You deal with subordinates, when you deal with your colleagues, when you deal with your superiors. In work environment, there are no superiors that way. In ashrams, she says, I give work, I don't give positions. But you must start believing that I have been given position. I can be like an autocrat. So, the leaders must always set the example. The leaders must always practice the virtues they demand from those who are in their care. So it's a top-down approach, which is what all true leaders actually demonstrate. One is leader by name, but you don't display any of the virtues which you expect, people. They must be understanding, patient, enduring, full of sympathy and warm and friendly goodwill. Not out of egoism to win friends for themselves. See, mask ego can wear. See, I am so nice, I am so friendly. Everybody says you are so good. I please everyone. No, she's not saying that. That's not how it should be done. But out of generosity to be able to understand and help others. To forget oneself, one's own likings and preferences is indispensable in order to be a true leader. Just the opposite of what we are taught in leadership management. Be aggressive, be assertive. She's saying be humble, be clear-sighted. Practice the virtues you expect others. Then your voice carries the ring of truth. That is what I am asking of you now, so that you can face your responsibilities as you should. And then you will find that where you used to feel disorder and disunity, they vanished, and harmony, peace, and joy have taken their place. And then she says something which is actually after this is, but I'll read how to read Sri Aurobindo and the mother. But after this sentence, something which should be etched in the very heart, because she is not physically present. So she is saying that now that I am not physically present, but she is closing this letter in such a beautiful way. You know that I love you and that I am always with you to sustain you, help you, and show you the way. Blessings. This is on page 356 of Collected Works of the Mother, volume 12. Because some people may like to, take it out. You know that I love you and that I am always with you to sustain you, help you, and show you the way. What else one would ever want in life? And then finally, how to read. After all this, it makes sense how to read Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Why to read? What have they brought? So if you are ready, willing to go through this labor, often people want to us to join the ashram, and sometimes they write queries, some out of over-eagerness, some out of genuine urge, some that, I have gone to this or that ashram shopping. This seems all right. But the sadhaks don't seem. I said, if you start with this, you won't. Because what is your idea of sadhak? You are seeing the dress, not the man inside. So many people don't understand. They have that conventional idea that, so, so first study Sri Aurobindo and the mother's books. That's what I suggest. So the question is how to read Mother and Sri Aurobindo's books. She says to read my books is not difficult because they are written in the simplest language, almost the spoken language. Most of them are conversations, and there is something, why, I don't know why, people straight away, I want to read The Life Divine or Synthesis of Yoga. Okay, read Mother's works. Everything is there, same truth. Except that it's too simple to be true perhaps. We have a problem. We want hi-fi language. When we read about the word Brahman, then our mind spins, this is spiritual. When she speaks about how to deal with life problem, this is ordinary. Not realizing she is passing on that consciousness everywhere in everything. So she says, my books, so my recommendation is always read the mother's works first. To draw profit from them, it is enough to read with attention and concentration and an attitude of inner goodwill with the desire to receive and to live what is taught. That's all that is required, and we can see that's the reason why we are doing this series. Just to make all of us familiar with the wealth that is in Mother's works. To read what Sri Aurobindo writes is more difficult because the expression is highly intellectual, because it comes from the heights. Even to receive, most of us go off to sleep. Somebody other day, but the irony is, anyways, I won't mention the name, but there is a book on Sri Aurobindo written. So he says that, I thought of, writing this. I was asked to write. And then he says, I thought, okay, I will read all his works. In 2 years, I'll complete, then I'll write so that I'm authentically. When I started reading, in 1 year, even one book I couldn't finish. So I realized that how can I, even lifetime I won't be able to read. So they decided to call some people and come together and write. But it's so, still you see how the ego plays. You have called people who have again not really read the work in totality. But this is true. To read Sri Aurobindo's books in completeness is a yoga in its own right. And of course the mother's works. But it is difficult. There is no doubt about it. The brain needs a preparation. It's not about language. She's not saying the language is just difficult. Well, it's of course Cambridge English. But the brain, because he brings in so many sides together, that's why long sentences. And that's why it's so difficult sometimes. But actually, it's if you ask me, my experience is very easy. When I started, I just couldn't stop. But because the brain is accustomed to the fixed ideas. So when it is reading, it wants certain philosophical statements which you don't find. You find Sri Aurobindo speaking about molecular genetics in the chapter on cosmic indeterminates. So you wonder, what is he speaking about? Why suddenly he is speaking about genes, heredity and tree and seed? But yes, can you explain the tree emerging out of the seed only on the basis of genes? There is some force which gives expression. We use the word force of heredity. But what drives the force of heredity? Then you understand. So if you have the question and seeking, it becomes very easy. So the brain needs a preparation to be able truly to understand, and generally a preparation takes time unless one is specially gifted with an innate intuitive faculty. That's wonderful if one is gifted. In any case, I advise always to read a little at a time, keeping the mind as tranquil as one can without making an effort to understand, because the mind will start going on a giant wheel. Stay quiet. It's not a mechanical reading she's advising, but to stay quiet, to receive, to absorb. And letting the force contained, keeping the head as silent as possible and letting the force contained in what one reads enter deep within. This force received in the calm and the silence will do its work of light. And if needed, now comes a master word. So it will do its work of light. They are capsules of light. You take in and it will release light. And light will start working. It is seated inside. But she says something wonderful after this. If needed, will create in the brain the necessary cells for the understanding. Yoga of the body starts with the brain. Like golden light came down into my brain, the grey rooms of my mind, sun-touched became a bright reply to wisdom's occult plane, a calm illumination and a flame. This will create new brain cells. Thus, when one rereads the same thing some months later, one perceives that the thought expressed has become much more clear and close, and even sometimes altogether familiar. It is preferable to read regularly, a little every day, and at a fixed hour if possible. This facilitates the brain receptivity because time can become a great help. All the seen unseen mechanisms, it's like food when you have a time. So when you have that fixed time, fixed hour, sit in quietude and read it. And even as I am reading it, I must say I didn't read it like that. It was like a fire. It was difficult to stop reading. So even in the washroom I was reading. Bus stand I was reading, train I was reading, and one of the craziest was just a little funny aside. I had gone to pick up my parents, they were coming by train. So the train was coming after 45 minutes, so I sat on the platform, started reading Sri Aurobindo's works. And that I didn't realize. Train came, they got down, they looked around for me, they also missed me. They went and then they got very annoyed. They thought we'll go back. But then finally they went. Of course, my wife was in the home, but they had to go almost 1 hour. So I'd come to take them, and after 2 hours, I'm realizing why the train has not come. So I went to ask them that, has the train become more late? They said the train has come and gone. So I came home, Patiala, to see they are there. All of them were doing me bashing naturally. I had an excuse. See, this is what I was. I was reading this. So it's so absorbing. It's something so fascinating. It's once you get delight in Sri Aurobindo's works, joy, then it's like you are in it. So one has to wait for that joy to emerge. It comes by grace. If you ask me, it comes by grace. It is preferable to read regularly, a little every day, and at a fixed hour if possible. This facilitates the brain receptivity. Okay, so this completes our collected works of the Mother, Volume 12. There are 3 plays I have not touched upon. Each of them is a marvel, The Great Secret, The Ascent to Truth, and Toward the Future. Worth reading. Each play is like in its own right. I think one of them I have done during one of the classes, Toward the Future perhaps. But anyways, every word of theirs is a treasure trove. Jai Ma.